Are you in debt? Do you need a strategy to get out of debt? Well, today I've got a guest that's going to help you do just that. So stay tuned.
How do I bring my faith to work? How do I tap into the power of God in my work-life call? Why am I going through this adversity? Is God mad at me? I'm Hillman, and I've been helping leaders like you answer these questions and more for over 30 years. That's what this podcast is all about. Let's learn and grow together. Welcome to TGIF. Today, God is First. So welcome to our podcast this week. It's such a delight to have my daughter as my guest this week, and her name is Charis Brown. And Charis is in the media, and she has a new book out. And it's a book that everyone's going to benefit from. And so she is author of two books. She actually created a new book when she was working for me called TGIF for Next Generation. And her new book is called Alt Money Choices, Securing Financial Freedom, One Choice at a Time. And she speaks to groups about faith and finance. She's also an editor for Clark.com and managing editor for ClarkDeals.com, a daily deals website started by consumer expert, radio talk show host, and New York Times bestselling author Clark Howard. She lives with her husband just a few miles from me with their cat in North Atlanta. Well, Charis, great to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, Dad.
Well, you've done a great job with this new book, and we're going to get into some details. But before we do, let me just tell people that, this is your second book, and you wrote TGIF for Next Generation, which is a daily devotional, and you can get it online at your website. What website is that if they want to go and sign up at your place?
Oh, well, if they want to get the free devotional, it's prismministries.org. But of course, you guys have copies, so I would encourage people to get copies from you too. So
yeah, it's a 365-day daily devotional, and her ministry site is prismministries.org, PRISM ministries.org. But today we're talking about this new book, and Clark Howard, it's interesting. He is a household name in Atlanta and a few other cities. How many cities is he in now?
He's in quite a few. There's a long list of media affiliates that will air the show in different markets. LA is one of those. Ohio is another one. But there's several big cities that regularly air the Clark Howard show. So
yeah, well, he's quite a name in different markets, and he helps people save money. And it evidently has rubbed off on Charis because she now has a book that he is endorsing, and he won't endorse a book that doesn't prove it's going to save people money. So you can be sure this has been field tested by Clark. But he gave a great recommendation for the book. And today we're going to talk about this and listen to what Clark says about the book. I loved Charis's book. I couldn't stop reading it, and I finished it in a couple of hours. What I love about Charis's story is she's so methodical about her process, and she's not preaching at people. She's teaching how to get their money in order. And so that's what we're going to learn today. And so we're going to go ahead and shut our video off. So today we're going to talk about top 10 financial mistakes people make that cost them money and how you can avoid them. Charis, when I looked at that list, I thought that was an incredible list of things that, money just flows out of our pockets so easily sometimes.
mm-hmm.
And you put together a list and different aspects of what those 10 things are that eat people's money. And so we're going to go through each one, and you're going to tell us what we need to know about it. And mistake number one is overbuying on a home. Tell us about that.
All right. Well, a home, is probably one of the biggest financial decisions that we'll make in a lifetime, because a home is generally the most expensive part of somebody's budget. If you look at someone's budget like a pie, the housing cost is going to take up a big portion of that pie. And so, you really want to think about that, and not in terms of what your realtor is telling you and what your banker is telling you, because often they're going to try to get you into something that is at the max of what you can afford. But what you really want to do is you want to look at your budget, and you don't want your housing expense to eat up, more than 25%, 20%. If you can get it down to 15, that's really ideal. But so many people overbuy on their house, and then they don't have money later in retirement when they need it most. And so, just to give you a couple of figures, if you buy a $250,000 house, that's going to end up with interest being over $400,000. If you buy a $500,000 house, it's going to end up being over $700,000 because
Mm.
of the interest. And so you can see how much that adds up over time.
One of the things people don't realize is if you just pay a little extra every month, you can significantly reduce the overall amount that you're going to spend and reduce the term of your loan. Just paying an extra $50 or $100 a month can make a big difference.
Yes, that's so true. Yes, and that's one of the things that we highlight in the book, just about, those little changes that you can make that will make a big difference. So that's definitely one of those choices that you can make.
Yeah. All right. Mistake number two, overbuying on a car.
Well, we just actually bought a new car, new to us. It's not a brand new car. It's a 2009 Honda. But we were really feeling good about this decision because we were able to buy cash. And just like you, Dad, like when you helped me buy my first car, my dad helped me. He put 50% down, I put 50% down, and we paid cash for it, which is great. So we paid for this car in cash. And, when an expense starts to meet a psychological need versus a physical need, that's when we tend to overspend. So I don't know about you, but like I saw all these Lexus commercials and different brands of cars over the holidays. And it's like
Mhm.
this December to remember event. And, it's like, oh, your spouse could be surprised by this $45,000 car. And, I think for most Americans, that would be a surprise, but not in a good way. Because, if you're married, you want to talk to your spouse and your significant other about any big financial purchase. And so, with cars, CNBC, I believe it's CNBC. No, it's actually Forbes. So Forbes wrote a piece about how buying new cars can delay your retirement by years. It can delay it 14 years, 15 years, just because people, take cues from commercials to buy their cars. And so what you really want to do is the sweet spot in car ownership is buying a 2-year-old used car because, once it drives off the lot, it's lost a lot of value. So, and then really being intentional about researching the kind of car that you want to get, making sure it's reliable, making sure it's good on gas, because we want to get all the bells and whistles, but those bells and whistles can cost us. And when we're paying for image when it comes to cars, that can really cause us to overspend.
Mm. Yeah, that's good. I know that we recently bought a car and found out that, we searched all over Atlanta and we went beyond Atlanta. And don't be afraid to look beyond your own city to find the best deal because sometimes it's not in your particular city. Atlanta is a very competitive market for certain types of vehicles, and so you want to really look everywhere when you're searching for a car. But that's good advice. All right, mistake number three is going out to eat too much. Ooh, that one hurts.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just so convenient to go out to eat. One of the things that we did in our 11-month long experiment is, this book is about the little choices that we made and that we journaled throughout an 11-month time frame. And one of those choices that we made was making different decisions when it came to going out to eat and maybe choosing a less expensive restaurant over a more expensive one. And just knowing how much that adds up over time, that can make a huge impact in your budget. But even, you don't have to deprive yourself, maybe going to Chipotle or Chick-fil-A or something like that, instead of going to a sit down, more expensive restaurant, that can really make a big difference. And just to put it into perspective, a $50 meal out once a week costs $2,600 per year. So you think
Mm.
about that and you think about, wow, what could I do with that money? I could put that money into my retirement account, my IRA. I could go on a vacation with it. And so it's just about figuring out where your money is going and putting it in places where you really want it to go, because it's so easy to spend that money going out to eat. But maybe, there's something else that you could do with that money.
Yeah, and you say habits, a lot of times we get in the habit of just going out and don't even think about it. So I think it's what you're saying is let's be intentional about being frugal or being disciplined about how many times we're going to eat out, etc.
Exactly.
Well, mistake number four is not saving enough for retirement.
Yeah, that's a big one, and unfortunately, it's one that affects so many Americans. Most of us don't have enough retirement money saved, but it is the top financial regret of the elderly. And so, And that's according to an article by CNBC. And so, if at all possible, if you're, even just starting, start at 1% saving for retirement, and then just build up, year after year. And once you get used to a certain amount of income, it makes it far easier to live at that income later in life. And so, I would encourage people, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, start now. Just start with a little bit and see how much that little bit can grow, because anything that you put into a retirement savings account, a Roth IRA is a great place to start, with a company like Vanguard or Fidelity. And, you can see that income really start, beefing up as it, works with compound interest. And so that would definitely be something that we need to do better at as Americans.
When you say Roth IRA, why don't you explain what that is for the folks?
Sure. So an IRA is an individual retirement account, and you can use these accounts to stash away money for retirement. You can do a traditional IRA, or you can do a Roth IRA. And a Roth IRA is a better option to many people. Something that Clark talks about a lot when people are just getting started, because you pay the tax now. With a traditional IRA, you pay the tax once you take it out later. But you can stash, I believe this year it's $6,500 in either of those. And that's the maximum that you can put in there. But if you're not already contributing to a 401k at work, the 401k would be the number one place to start, because if you have a match, that's like free money. So definitely want to start with a 401k and then see if you can add some to an IRA, preferably a Roth IRA if you can.
Yeah, and saving is not just saving by putting money away, but it's also not spending.
Right.
And that's one of your testimony about writing your own book was about. In fact, why don't you share briefly with the folks what happened with you and kind of what motivated you to get out of debt?
Yes, absolutely. And, this is kind of school of hard knocks for me, because dad has always told me not to get into debt. But I did for school, and I tried to start a business when I was like 19, 20. And so I had over $35,000 in student loan debt hanging over me. And when my husband Justin and I got married, we had a combined total of $300,000 of debt, because we had two homes and we bought them at the height of the market. And we had credit card debt, we had car loans. And so we really had to work hard at getting all of those debts out of the way. But we kept knocking them out. And so the student loan was the final kind of straw, and I really wanted to pay that off as quickly as possible. So that's where this whole idea of alt money choices came from, and recording expenses and making the better financial choice. And so we were able to pay off that student loan that was $27,000 at the start of the year, and we were able to pay that off within 11 months.
That's awesome. So one of those things that you had to do was budgeting, and that's mistake number 5. How important is budgeting?
That is still hard. I think it's always going to be hard for us and many people. And, budgeting is something that, people hear it. And I was chatting with a women's group, and I mentioned budgeting, and they're all like, oh, there's a groan that echoed throughout the room. But budgeting is, not necessarily constraints. It's just kind of guidelines and a plan. And so, there's plenty of free budgeting apps out there. Budgeting doesn't have to be hard. There's, Clarity Money, there's Mint, there's all kinds of apps that you can just plug in, your info, and it'll spit out what you're spending. And then you can kind of decide what your thresholds are for different categories. So another way to do it is cash. One thing that we did is, and we continue to try to do is, especially with food expenses and grocery expenses, we try to use cash, because you have that set amount, and we treat cash much differently than we treat a credit card.
Agree with that one.
Yeah. With a credit card, it's so easy to swipe, and studies have shown that we spend less when we use cash, because we have a different relationship with cash, because we see it leave our hand. And so it's a much different experience, even though most of us are encouraged to use plastic because it's so convenient. So budgeting is definitely, one of those things that we want to try to get a hold of when it comes to success with money.
Yeah, and I think that, talking about credit and debt, and, nowadays they're really trying to allure us into the credit cards because of a 2% cash back or 3%. And, all of that, that may be good on the front end, but it actually encourages you to spend more, because you think, oh, I'm getting money back though. And all you're doing is spending more money. And but that's so true. When I go to the grocery store and pull out cash to pay for something, I take it more seriously than if I just use my credit card.
Right, exactly. And one thing that you could do is, if you want to use credit cards and you want the benefits of the cash back or whatever, you can use credit cards for fixed expenses that you'd be paying for anyway. And, use cash maybe for those more variable expenses that, can get out of hand easily.
Yeah, and it's so important for you to not carry over in your spending and carry debt on a credit card, because that will absolutely eat you up
Yeah.
with the high interest rates of most credit cards.
Yes.
And so, the way you beat the credit cards is those recurring incomes or recurring expenses. Use the credit card for that if you want to bill miles or you want to, bill cash back. But the way you beat them is you pay that thing off every month,
Yes.
and that's when that card becomes your servant instead of you being the servant to that debt.
Right, exactly. I mean, if you can't do that with credit cards, maybe just stick to the cash or the debit. But yeah, that's definitely, I mean, number one rule of credit cards: make sure you can pay it off every single month.
Yeah. Mistake number 6: falling for scams.
Well, there's so many scams that steal people's money, and Clark's Consumer Action Center gets calls, every day, hundreds of calls from people who have fallen prey to some kind of scam. There's tons of scams that are happening right now. One of the most popular ones has been the IRS Social Security scam, where you get a call from the IRS and they're telling you that you owe money and are threatening you. But the IRS does not communicate that way. They send letters in the mail. Social Security is the same way. So what you want to do is, if you're faced with something like a phone call or somebody that wants to sell you software or something, do a little bit of research about it. Don't immediately take action. Try to stop yourself from taking action when it comes to any of these things, and do some research and see if there's a scam out there that you need to be aware of. A lot of times, there's government websites that have a list of scams that are popping up in greater frequency, and so you can check that out. But that's definitely something that, to watch out for. Even gift card scams, where, someone might want to sell you a gift card and then it ends up not having any money on it. So just be aware of the scams that are out there. Clark.com is a great resource for looking for scams. And then some of those other websites are really great too.
Yeah, and be careful with investments that are promising very high returns. Back in the 90s, I became a victim to a Bernie Madoff type of scam where he was having 20% interest, and it just, that interest, those reports came every month saying, oh, you made this much, you made this much. Then all of a sudden I get a phone call from my manager, and he says all of your money is gone. The man that we'd been working with was a scam artist, and they had fled the country, and that was over $500,000, and we never got one penny back. And so be careful with the types of investments that you go into.
Mhm.
And when they claim to have incredible returns, it's probably a situation that you really need to think twice about.
Yeah, and I know that was a really painful life lesson. I'm glad that you're sharing it with everyone, because so many people have gotten taken by scams like that. And as the slide says, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. You just have to watch out and don't use any income that you really need in an investment. You only want to use cash that you can afford to lose in an investment.
That's a very good word there. Mistake number 7: shopping as a hobby.
Well, this goes back to habits. And, in the book, I just shared that habits are one of our most money saving assets. And that is so true. And what, being in debt taught Justin and I was that, we learned to live on less than what we made. And so that was something that I think will just, have such an impact on me for the rest of my life, just trying to live beneath our means and pay off that debt. But shopping, I mean, some of us are shopaholics. Of course, I'm looking at deals all the time with my job, and it's very tempting. But you want to be careful not to make shopping one of those things that's filling another kind of void. Shopping can be fun. It's fun to get those deals. I love deal hunting. But we just want to make sure that our habits are not leading us, as you said before, into a path of, bondage where, we're becoming a slave to a certain habit or whatever. So that's something that is just good to watch out for.
Well, I think the other thing is that addictions can come in a lot of different forms. And an addiction is anything that you can't lay down voluntarily. And if you find that you simply have to shop or have to do something else, then you most likely have some kind of addiction. And you need to look at the root cause of that and what need you're trying to meet that shopping or whatever it activity it is trying to meet. And so this is an area that is very practical, and we need to look at it and see what it might be doing to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
Mistake number 8, not having insurance.
Yes. And so, we often think about insurance like car insurance, homeowners insurance, renters insurance, but other kinds of insurance are often overlooked. For example, disability insurance. Social Security, the Social Security government website tells us that 1 in 4 of today's young people will be disabled at some point in their lives. And so it's really important to consider disability insurance as you're looking at budgeting and monthly expenses because, anyone can become disabled at any moment. And so it's really good to think about short-term disability and long-term disability. I've got a friend of mine, she's chronically sick and she's been that way ever since she was 27. And so it's just sad for me to watch that because, she could have probably had a much easier time if they had known about getting disability insurance when they were in their 20s. And so that's just something that I would just plead everyone to look at, just because the statistics are real. 25% of us will be in some place where we're not able to work, and so it's really important that we are covered not just in our car insurance but also disability insurance, and of course health insurance.
Another factor in that is to make sure that you have income that you can live off of 2 to 3 months. Set aside in an account a amount of money that if something happens, that you can go to that money to be able to offset what might happen. You never know what comes across our path sometimes, and having 2 to 3 months of operating income is a wise thing to do. And that's separate from your long-term insurance, not insurance, but long-term retirement savings. This
Mhm.
is a short-term money that should there be an emergency. In other words, it's your emergency fund. And
Right.
so if you can't put that much aside yet, just start putting a little bit toward that account and set it up as a separate account, as a money market or something like that, and just put money in there until you get to at least 3 months of operating income.
Yep, that's good. And if you have that money saved up, maybe you won't need the short-term disability insurance. But yes, that is definitely something that would be good for everyone to consider.
Mistake number 9, not paying bills on time.
Well, we live in a credit-based society, and I know that there's some financial experts out there that, don't want to use the credit cards and don't want to rely on credit. But, credit becomes a lot easier if you're looking at buying a car or you need to buy a house. And so paying bills on time is definitely a part of that. And so when you're looking at a credit score, 35% of credit history is based on, or 35% of the credit score is based on your history, and then 30% is the amount owed. So that's over 60% of the total credit score. And so when you're paying bills on time, especially credit cards, your credit score is going to go up. And you want to make sure that your debt to credit ratio percentage is below 30% overall, which means that the amount that you owe is 30%. Is 30% of the overall credit that you have, if that makes sense, because that also has a big impact on your credit score.
Yeah. Now, a lot of times we get these promos for apps that will give us your credit score. Do you recommend people getting that? How important is it for them to stay in touch with their credit score?
Yes, that's a really good idea. And when the whole Equifax breach happened, a lot of people were very concerned about their credit, and rightly so. So one of the great ways to keep track of that is Credit Karma. It's spelled with a K, and so you can go on that site and you can monitor your credit. And if there's any changes to your credit, say if somebody opens an account in your name, Credit Karma is going to alert you of that, and so you'll be able to catch it in time. A lot. A lot of things that a lot of times what people do is they'll actually freeze their credit. And if they're concerned about, people stealing their credit history or whatever, or opening accounts in their name, they can actually freeze their credit. If you don't have anything that you need to apply for, you have a house, it's pretty much set, you're not making any big changes. That's another great way to keep criminals from accessing your credit, would be to do a credit freeze.
Mm. Good. Mistake number 10, getting into debt.
This is probably my top mistake. And the book, Alt Money Choices, is just all about our journey of getting out of debt and making better financial choices. But debt can cost us so much over time. In Proverbs, I know you've said this many times, the borrower is slave to the lender, Proverbs 22:7. And so we want to be careful that money is our slave and we're not a slave to money. But the cost of financing can be pretty high. When you think about mortgages, they're generally considered good debt because you're actually, going to get your house, but you're still paying a whole lot in interest. For example, a $150,000 mortgage is going to cost almost $5,000 in interest in the first year. And so, when you think about that compared to, the tax write-off you're getting, most people don't even itemize, so it's kind of a wash. So, when people are touting like home ownership, you just want to be aware of what you're actually spending in interest because that can really add up over time. I remember, one of my biggest mistakes was, buying a house with an interest-only loan. I don't know what I was thinking, but I thought the market would go up, and it didn't. It crashed almost as soon as I bought that house. And so when I look back at how much money I was paying in interest, it is absurd, and how much I could have directed that money in other places, like, you know, saving for retirement or business or whatever. And so that's one thing that, we're generally accustomed to as a society is getting into debt. But we, in order to save more money and, have more financial stability in our lives, we really need to think about and think hard when we are faced with getting into debt, because that can cost so much in the long run.
Over the years, I've had people talk about the um, whether you should pay off your mortgage if you have the ability to pay it off.
Mhm.
And I have always said, yes, absolutely, you want to do that. And some would kind of, argue that point to say that, well, why would I want to do that? I've got my money over here collecting interest, and I get an interest deduction on my mortgage. And the answer to that is you're presuming upon the future for the first thing. You don't know that you'll be able to pay that in the future when you have the ability now. And that's exactly what happened to me back in the 90s when I had that Bernie Madoff situation. I could have paid my mortgage off at that time, but I didn't based on that logic. So
Right.
then after that happened, it was tough for me to make that mortgage for a season.
Mhm.
And so the premise that you're having a tax deduction, look, you're paying a whole lot more interest than the benefit you're getting from a tax deduction than if you had paid off that completely. So there is no better feeling than living in a house that is paid for and nobody can take it from you, because you
That's our
never
next
know.
goal.
You, you never know what's coming down the pike. And so, that presumption upon the future is not faith, it's presumption.
Right.
So if you have the ability to pay it off, pay it off. If you have the ability to pay an extra 100 a month, do that. Anything you can do to reduce the amount of interest you're paying and to get that house under your belt and not the bank's belt.
Right. Exactly.
All right, so we've been talking about alt money choices, securing financial freedom one step at a time. You can get it on our bookstore at tgifbookstore.com. You can also get it on Charis's website at altmoneychoices.com. And, some of the practical things you're going to learn in this book are how small choices can really add up and why changing your money habits have a big impact over time. And you're going to read about Charis's strategy for paying off $27,000 of debt in 11 months. She took small choices that added up over time, and how to make saving money fun, and the science of making better choices, money mentalities that separate the rich from everyone else, and simple steps you can take. I encourage you to get this book. So, Karis has been on this journey with me for many years. And after all these years, we've been equipping leaders, and we've been thinking about how we can help those that we've been serving for these years go deeper and help them with specific things that they tell us they have need help with. And so we've been listening to some of our listeners, and I want to encourage you that if you'd like to know about these coming things that we're about to do, that we're going to announce very shortly within a month or two about a new program, you can get on the waiting list for that at becomegodschangeagent.com. That's godschangeagent.com. And if you get on the waiting list, you'll be the first one to be notified. You'll get a discount on this new program that we're going to be doing. Plus, you will get a download that's free of my top 10 biblical truths for succeeding in life and work. And so if that's of interest to you, just go to becomegodschangeagent.com. Won't cost you anything just to be on the waiting list, and that'll be a free download. Now, let me remind you that if you're listening on iTunes, we want you to rate our podcast. That allows us to encourage others to come to and subscribe to our podcast and download the podcast audio. And if you're watching us on YouTube, we want you to subscribe to our channel and share your comments at the bottom of the presentation on YouTube, and that will allow us also to have more people watching our programs. And so let's, Charis, why don't we come back on to video just for a moment as we say goodbye to our friends. And let's see if I can do that. There we are. There we are both. So again, the book is Alt Money Choices. It's a great read. It's not a very big book. It's only 118 pages. So, I like those kind of small books you can read almost in one session, but you won't do that in this because you need to really study what to do and take the advice that she has there. Well, Charis, as we close out today, any final words for those that are out there?
Well, I think one of the things that just became such a big theme of the book is, just realizing how much God gave us choice and how it's one of the gifts that he gave us, in the Garden of Eden. He gave Adam and Eve a choice. And so, one of the most impactful things that I want people to get from the book is just to realize, you might be in a certain situation or you might be facing a big challenge right now, but there are choices that you have that you may not even have thought of yet. And God has given us creativity as well. And so even though we might feel like we're in a tough spot, he can give us ideas and solutions to those things that we're facing. And so, he just gave us such a big gift when it came to our choice. And so I just want to encourage people with that.
Yeah, and that's a good word. I think that whenever we are intentional about something like this, God sees that. It's a step of faith. And sometimes when you put your first foot forward towards something, God multiplies it. And it's amazing how many things can change. In my own situation, although I'd lost $500,000, at the end of 7 years, God restored all of it back. And I had no idea that was going to happen. But I was just seeking God and asking him to help me walk through that season. And I paid off all the debts I owed as a result of that crisis. And that's important. So be faithful in the little things and the big things, and God will honor that faith. So, well, Charis, thanks so much. And everybody joining us today, God bless you, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Thank you.